Hello everybody! This is the softest and cutest cat hat suitable for the cold season, which has become popular and trendy these days. I am Marzie and today we are going to crochet this beautiful hat together. So let's go! Open the first loop from the connecting part. Consider 14 loops for crocheting. You can increase or decrease this number with the desired size. Now we start crocheting. We go back from the 14th loop. In fact, we skip the 15th loop from the 14th loop. In the same way as in the video, we do the crocheting loop by loop. To the end of the row, we take the new loop from the main yarn and pass it through the crocheting loop. While crocheting, be careful that the loop you pass does not swing. This will be our first row. Pull out the loops well so that they pass completely. We turn again and crochet in the opposite direction. Again, we take the new loop from the main yarn and pass it through the crocheting loop. We crochet all 14 loops in the same way until the end of the row. The second row is finished. Such a plan should be made. Continue crocheting in the same way for 30 rows. While crocheting, you can try and see how many rows you need to connect the beginning and end of the swatch under the chin. To connect the new yarn, put the two ends of the yarn on top of each other and sew them together with a needle and thin thread of the same color, so that the distance between them is the same as the distance between the rest of the loops. Then cut the extra yarns. Pay attention to the video. Now for crochet of the lower part, we put the two edges on top of each other. Now we have two sides, one with the loops and the other without the loops. So we have to use the loops of the main yarn on the side where we don't have loops. For this, we must pass the loops exactly between the stitches of the swatch. So make sure that we pass the loops on the main yarn exactly between the stitches of the swatch, not in the middle of the stitches. It seems to be a continuation of the crocheting itself. Basically, we need to pull out 14 loops on this edge. After the 14th loop, we reach the beginning of the edge. We have to connect the two edges with the yarn we have here. We pass this yarn through two opposite loops on the edges. Then we tie a knot at the back of the work. We cut off the excess and then we sew it with a needle and thin thread of the same color. Now we have a large loop for the neck, which contains 28 loops. To crochet this part in the first row, first we crochet 6 loops as before. In the 7th loop, we skip 2 loops from the main yarn and increase like this. We will crochet 6 loops again as before and we will increase the loop in the 7th loop. Basically, we should increase 4 loops in this row. And since we had 28 loops, then we crochet the entire row of 6 loops normally and skip 2 loops from the main yarn in the 7th loop. And with this process, the number of rings reaches 32. According to the yarn that we hid in the swatch, we can find the beginning of the row. Crochet round to row 7 as before without adding a loop. In these rows, the number of rings is 32. Seven rows are finished, and now we need to separate the main yarn. You have two options here. If you want to sew the seam on the back of the hat with the main yarn, you must cut the long main yarn. For this purpose, cut 10 loops of yarn from the connecting part to give us a long yarn for sewing, and cut the rest of the yarn. But if you want to sew this seam with a needle and thin thread of the same color, you should cut only one loop of the main yarn from the joint and cut the rest of the yarn. Sew this open loop to the back of the work with thread and needle. Now we need to blind the open loops. For this, we pass the second loop from the first loop. Then we pass the next loop from the previous loop. In the same way, we cross the loops one by one and blind the loops until the end. Cross the last two loops and pass the long yarn through the remaining loop. First, we pass this yarn between the next stitch as shown in the video. Now we pass this yarn along the stitches to reach the seam. To sew the seam on the back of the hat, we turn it over and sew the seam with the needle and main yarn as shown in the video. For the ear, first we cut the first 3 loops from the joint. This yarn is for sewing the ears to the hat. Then we make a chain of 4 loops. For this purpose, we skip the second loop from the first loop. Then we pass the next loop from the remaining loop. And we repeat the same thing 2 more times. Now we pull out the stitches of the first row. In the first chain where we have a loop, we must pass another loop from the main yarn. From chains 2 and 3, we pull out 1 loop each. From the last chain, we have to pull out 2 loops. There are 6 loops in this row. For the second row, we have nothing to do with the first loop and the last loop. In this case, 4 loops remain for us. As in the first row, we skip 2 loops from the first loop. We skip 1 loop each from the second and third loops. From the fourth loop, we skip 2 loops again. With this, we have 6 new loops, which with the 2 loops we already had, makes a total of 8 loops. In the third row, we work with only for middle loops. In this row, we skip 1 loop from every for middle loops. In the fourth row, we consider only 2 middle loops and skip only 1 loop from each of them. Finally, we have 8 rings, 4 loops on the right and 4 loops on the left. At this stage, we need to blind the loops on both sides. As in the video, we start from one side, on the 4 loops on this side. We pass the second loop from the first loop and the next loop from the remaining loop, and we continue this until only 1 loop remains. We do the same for the loops on the other side. Finally, 2 loops remain. We skip 1 of the loops from that one. Here, on the main yarn, we cut a loop from the joint and separate the rest of the yarn. Pass the same yarn through the remaining loop. Now we tie the yarn. It gives a little shape to the ear. We hide the end of the yarn behind the ear of the stitches and sew its head with a needle and thin thread of the same color. Now we need to crochet the inner part of the ear. We use yarn of different colors. We consider 4 loops to start crocheting. We pass a loop through each. Now we have 4 loops. We have to reduce this number to 2 loops. For this, we put 2 loops on one side and pass a loop between them. The same way from the other side. With this, the number of loops is reduced to 2. Now we pass one of the loops from that one. Here on the main yarn, we cut a loop from the joint and separate the rest of the yarn. Pass the same yarn through the remaining loop. Now we tie the yarn. We hide the end of the yarn behind the ear of the stitches and sew its head with a needle and thin thread of the same color. The inner part of the ear is placed inside the main ear and we sew around it with a needle and thin thread of the same color. To find the exact location of the ears, first arrange the head completely so that the edges completely overlap. Now we go 2 rows lower than the top of the head and 6 stitches back from the edge of the hat. This is the ear junction. We place the ear in this place and insert the long yarn on it into the needle, and then sew the ear to the hat with the help of this yarn. You can slightly curve the sewing area for more beauty. Take the tail of the yarn inside the hat and tie it. Then sew it with a needle and thin thread of the same color and cut off the excess yarn. If, like me, you have not yet sewn the inner part of the ear, at this stage you should do it with the help of a needle and thin thread of the same color. Connect the next ear to the hat in the same way. Congratulations! You have now crocheted your most beautiful, warmest, and softest hat. To use, take the neck part inside and put the hat on the head. Thank you for accompanying me in this video, and if it was useful for you, I would be happy to subscribe to the channel. I have to inform you that I have prepared an attractive surprise for you for the next tutorial, so don't forget to activate the bell to be notified.